Surprise University.
A service of Babylon Theater
presents
Education warmed over.
postmodern education for the modern world.
Real SU classes.
Repackaged and produced just for you
To watch anytime.
on this station. Ooh. Tonight's program is
Hello, class. As always, I am your teacher, Dennis Menachie, here at Surprise University in sunny Houston, Kansas. I expect that you're all eagerly awaiting the translation of the second half of the phrase, the first half of which we learned in our last class. I am now permitted to tell you that the entire phrase used so often by the Babylon boys, when we say you, we mean you, has been translated for some time now. And I must tell you before proceeding any further that the rest of this lecture has been prepared by Greg and Nolan personally, and I have agreed to read it exactly as they have given it to me. This is not a trick, and it's not because they don't trust me, but this material is extremely important to them, and I understand that, and I'm quite happy to go along with their intentions here. Now, today we are going to discuss the way a phrase was translated from English to Babble. Many of you in the class have wondered how the phrase, when we say you, is translated as all power is in the outward flow. Seems quite different. First, though, let me remind you that this lecture was divided into 2 sessions because the material is so challenging, but it was also done to throw off the track certain forces which would like to prevent it from being presented at all. Rember, who teaches Babble 101, has explained it already in his lecture 6, and now it remains for me to explain it here from the slightly different perspective which makes this class different. The key, seems to me, is the apparent difference in the way the ancient Babylonians interacted with the world compared to how we in the current modern world do so. We tend to think that when we say something about the world, and I mean particularly scientists and others who observe for a living and report what they think they saw, we are saying it in keeping with the well-known saying, don't put the cart before the horse. This is, in itself, an outdated metaphor. I doubt if any of us has ever put a cart and a horse together into a kind of acting relationship, yet we all know what that means. And for this reason, it was chosen to help us visualize our highly prized scientific method. The ancient Babylonians, on the other hand, were quite comfortable putting the burden before the means of moving it. That is, they were not at all concerned about whether any work got done at all. And more to the point, whether anyone had tried to figure out anything about the workings of reality. It seems funny to us, who are obsessed with understanding psychology, our own and that of others, and we highly value knowledge and its transmission. It is perhaps a mistaken apprehension, but thanks to how it has been portrayed in the past, We have a vision of ancient Babylon as being in operation 24/7, as the pithy current phrase has it, and imagine most of that time having been used working on that legendary tower. Until recently, in fact, we lay people knew little else about that great culture. It has been estimated by someone, doesn't say here who it was, but probably rather pointlessly, at any rate, that in order for them to have gotten as far as they did on that colossal edifice before Jehovah or a natural disaster, perhaps, as the atheists might prefer it, destroyed much of what had been built, it would have required that about 75% of the local adult population to have been directly involved in the work. So there you have it. I have just told you a logical explanation for how the ancient Babylonians got things done without actually giving any information that pertains to it at all. This is known to the Bab Boys and maybe even the Car Talk guys as obfuscation. This word, one of the most important to know in Learnation as well as in speaking Babble with authority, refers to a kind of cleverness and the ability to use it so convincingly that those who wish to catch you in self-incrimination are convinced that you just told them what they wanted to know, when in fact you did nothing of the kind. The great social reformer, who some call Jesus, others Yeshua, was a master of this form of verbal martial art. Eventually, and it was probably the only way he could have been brought down, it was a betrayal from within his own group that was able to give the Farsis what they could not get through their own rather sneaky tactics. The B-Boys have brought this form of intellectual combat to a high level of sophistication, which might be the best explanation, if it is real, for their recent initiation into knowledge of the ABC. But whether or not you believe their claims in this regard, you can still practice your own use of obfuscation by trying to learn and imitate their style. Before I proceed any further, and this is a digression of my own, there is a small bit of housekeeping that needs to be done. After this session, there will only be one more lecture period that will officially require your attendance prior to the final test, which will determine whether you are allowed to proceed further in your studies on the subject of doing Babylon theater. And I can assure you that your colleagues in Babble 101 are in exactly the same position. As I've told you before, theirs is the same goal as ours, only reached from a slightly different path. Those of you who become certified to proceed further on this official Surprise University degree program will begin in the next term to work with those others who have been learning the basics of Babble, and thus to start to create your own conjoint paths towards the conclusion of this or these programs. So here's the housekeeping. Please continue not to use note-taking or other forms of study which you might be tempted to employ, thinking thus to improve your luck in this endeavor. It is not possible to find an intellectual shortcut in this work. To quote the reply of Matthew to his friend Zechariah in the movie of the same name, when he says, "Good luck, Matthew," as his friend is leaving on his highly allegorical attempt to seek out and to outdraw the gunfighter, his mentor, Job Kane. "Luck ain't got nothing to do with it, old buddy." Now, back to the official lecture. In a few moments, I'm going to tell you the full translation of the Bab Boys' most often spoken injunction. I now tell you that the mundane phrase which some of us have heard for years disguises a highly magical set of words which have been handed down to Greg and Nolan from the ABC, but probably first were discovered or utilized by the angels and aliens. These words, when we say you, we mean you, which have perhaps been modified many times for use with other beings, are known by the ancient and eternal teachers, which is how the ABC describe themselves, as the prime obfuscation. In a moment, I will write the Babble translation of these words on the board, and I will erase them again 2 minutes later, after I have spoken them and allowed enough time for you to commit them to memory. Do not write them down, students, or you will not remember them. They have been programmed with self-protective code. Take them in silently and repeat the entire two-part sentence in the translated form to yourself at least 500 times before our next class. Those of you watching this lecture on the television or other devices, I'm sorry to tell you, we'll soon find it fading from your memory because the words of the ABC are only transmitted through person-to-person speech. If you are truly interested in what is being done here, you should apply for acceptance into the course at Surprise University, assuming that Greg and Nolan decide to repeat it. Henceforth, class, you who are present in this room with me today, when you say the words you are now permitted to say publicly and with authority, namely, when we say you, we mean you, you will have trained yourself to hear inside you the translated words, which are the essence of the public words. This translation has been attained through a process similar to alchemy by the team appointed by Greg and Nolan, using that same science by which the ABC were able to create the language of Babel. Never, never say the real version of these words out loud. Do not discuss the words with your classmates, but from now on, treat each other as equals when you meet, because you will share the knowledge contained in these words. All power is in the outward flow, and the outward flow turns inward to the source of all power. Thank you. Good day.